Thanks for listening to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to help us reach a wider audience. To jumpstart your real estate investing career, please visit freewholesalecourse.com, the most complete free course on wholesaling real estate ever. We would also appreciate it if you left us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Thank you in advance for your support, and remember, you make your money when you buy, and you get paid when you sell. Now let's go build some wealth. All right, guys, welcome back to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. This is your host, David Dodge, co-host
Mike Slane. Hey, guys, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Today we are excited to talk about or continue our adventure on talking about rehabbing or buying rentals.
BRRRR strategy.
Yeah, the BRRRR strategy. So today we're going to be talking or delving into rehabbing. It's kind of part of 3 episodes. We're going to chop it up to briefer segments. And today we're going to focus on really just what is rehabbing and how do you do rental rehabbing for your rental properties as opposed to doing a major flip or rehabbing your own house. What are some of the differences that you're going to do? What's the purpose? All that sort of stuff. So today, and I honestly, I forgot until Dave told me today, it's like, why do we rehab our rentals? It's like, well, I don't know. That's just what we do. It's part of this. It's part of the BRRRR strategy, right? You know, it's buy, rehab, refinance, rent, repeat. You know, it's like that's just what you do. So Dave, you reminded me this morning what that real reason is. So what is the reason that you buy a rental and rehab it? Like, why would you do that? Why would you invest more money into a property that you're going to have as a rental?
That's a great question, Mike. Before I jump into that, I want to just recap on the BRRRR strategy. BRRRR, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So every one of these steps in this process is very, very important, okay? So today, as Mike had mentioned, we're going to talk about rehabbing. But in order for you to, rent the property after you purchase it, you're going to need to rehab it 9 times out of 10. And in order for you to even get a refinance that's favorable, so you can continue your BRRRR strategy, you have to rehab. So if you're buying a property that doesn't need a rehab, it's going to be very difficult to convince your banking partners to give you a refinance again that's favorable to where you can get all or most of your money back, okay? So Mike had a really good question. Why do we rehab? Well, there's a couple reasons.
Well, yeah, and one that Dave even said is like, well, you're going to have to rehab it. So why do we rehab? Well, you're going to have to. Why, Dave? I just buy a nice house. I'm not going to need to rehab it.
It's true.
Like Dave said, you could do that, but then you're not going to be able to refinance it. If it's already fixed up, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, it doesn't make sense for one reason. Whenever we do our rehabs, our banking partners require us to spend at least $15,000 on our rehabs. And the reason that they do this is because, and they refer to this as giving us an entrepreneurial credit, meaning that whenever they are doing their underwriting, it gives them the ability to look beyond just the cost of the purchase, so what you paid for the property, as well as the cost of the renovations or the cost of the rehab. Typically, whenever you go get a loan from a bank on an investment property, okay, this is not a primary residence, this is not a secondary home, this is investment property, they're going to give you a loan based upon the purchase price and the cost of those renovations. However, if you spend at least $15,000, at least with our banking partners, they look beyond those two numbers, and at that point, they are willing, is the right word, to lend you based on the appraisal and the appraisal only. So why does that matter, Mike? Why are those numbers different?
This is magical. This is what makes real estate such a powerful tool, or one of the things that makes such a powerful tool.
That's right.
So let's just run a quick example. Let's say we purchased a property and, I'm going to digress a little bit. I'm going to say, first off, I want to reiterate what Dave said is we're buying properties that need work, which is awesome because then we can buy them at a discount.
A,
So
we can buy them at a discount.
We can buy them at a discount.
And B, they need rehab, which is kind of almost a requirement in order for us to use the BRRRR strategy to the full potential.
But what it allows us to do then is buying these properties at a discount that need work is we're able to add value above and beyond just the material cost and the effort put into those properties.
Every dollar we put in, we're getting $2 in value.
Hopefully. Yeah, it doesn't always work that way, but that's the plan.
That's the plan.
So let's just use a quick example. So say we buy a property and we say, okay, this house is a little 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and it probably is worth $100,000 at the end of the day. Once it's fixed up, that's what properties in the area would sell for when it's fixed up, a nice little property. Well, we're able to pick it up for, say, $60,000. And the kitchen's outdated, the bathroom's outdated. It looks pretty bad. So again, we're able to buy it at $60,000 off market, and then we say, okay, what can we do with that? We can fluff it up. We can do a quick rental rehab on it, and maybe spend $20,000. So then we're going to be into this property for $80,000, and it's going to be worth $100,000
at least
on paper at the minimum.
Right.
So again, because we're doing a quick rental fluff up, we're going to spend a little bit less money. So it's going to a renter as opposed to a new home buyer. You're not going to do all the same things in the rehab, but you're going to make it look pretty close. You're going to make it look as good as. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. So if you've got a little bit older roof, say midlife, you don't necessarily have to replace that roof, but you're probably going to get a pretty similar appraisal value. Whereas if you were going to sell it, you might have to replace that roof. So again, there's just these slight differences where you can add value to the property. Very exciting stuff. Very cool.
Yeah. So great of the rehab is very important. And if you are buying a property to flip, meaning you're going to rehab it to retail it, the grade of that rehab, as Mike mentioned, it needs to be higher. You're going to probably need to swap out cabinets. You're going to probably need to do that roof, so on and so forth. But when you're dealing with a rental property, if you have, cabinets that are maybe a little old, but they're perfectly in good condition, instead of ripping all those out, you can paint them or you can add new hardware. So there's definitely, corners that you can cut or, costs that you can just avoid.
Well, there's a great example.
In general.
So we can talk about the grade of the rehab, like you said, and that's the roofing thing. If it's 15 years old, well, it's got half its life left. But again, a new home buyer comes up, they're going to be like, oh, I see some hail. The inspector's going to point out, there's some hail dings. We're going to need this roof replaced, stuff like that. So it's a whole different game. Whereas you've got probably 15 years worth of life left in that roof, you don't have to replace it.
Right. It's not leaking.
Talking about the kitchen, this is a great one, Dave. So you mentioned the cabinets. You can paint them up, and that's going to save a huge amount if they're in good shape. I just walked through one of our properties yesterday where the cabinets look great, but you open up underneath the sink and it's all rotted, because there was a water leak and it's just got some black, some mold under there, everything.
Yep.
So again, it's like, oh man, well, this is a rental. I'm not going to replace the whole cabinet. I'm going to cut out the boards underneath the sink. We're going to replace that board and we're going to make sure it doesn't leak anymore. So again, you've got a nice brand new, you can paint inside there as well.
You know what I saw recently, Mike, is that some people will make trays. They'll leave the rotted board in there. And they'll use a plastic tray. You can buy them, or Brad actually builds his own. And he just puts these trays in and he screws the tray in. Therefore, it makes it look pretty again. But also, if it leaks again, it's not wood there. He uses like a PVC type of plastic. Really interesting.
We should start doing that. That's a great idea.
But lots of little tips and tricks, guys, that you can use to kind of make shortcuts. And we're not saying cut corners to make the product less quality. We're just saying you don't need to go in and spend crazy money on it if it's a rental property. So another thing that we had, is reasons to rehab was you want a hassle-free unit. Mike, why does that even matter? What's important about a hassle-free unit?
So hassle-free unit, what does it even mean, first off? Well, the thing is, you've got tenants in there, and I think we can all, we've all heard that terminology in the investing world. It's tenants, toilets, and taxes. So those are the three things that are kind of a hassle when you're a landlord and you buy and own properties: is tenants, toilets, and taxes. So what does that mean? Well, the tenants, they're always going to be late paying rent, or they're going to have an issue with whatever. The toilets is talking about property maintenance. So your objective when you're rehabbing this unit, you're in there. It's your opportunity to make this house bulletproof. You want to make it hassle-free for yourself. You want surfaces that wipe down clean so they can't really mess everything up. You want things that work. You don't want to put in the lowest grade plumbing fixtures. Like that's one of the big things. It's like, oh, I could cut costs and put in a $20 sink
or shower head,
faucet,
but it's going to be broken in 4 months.
Exactly, it's going to start leaking and spraying water before you know it. So again, some of those things it's worth spending the extra money on to prevent a maintenance call. How much is it going to cost you to send out a handyman or a plumber to go replace a shower head?
It's a great point.
I mean, it's $200 just that you save or that you're.
So
gonna
really,
spend.
you have two options. One, you can do all the work in the beginning when the unit's vacant, or like right after you buy it and before you rent it, or you can do minimal work, but then you're going to be coming back a lot doing these repairs. So Mike and I, we prefer to do it right from the beginning. Therefore, there's always going to be maintenance. We're not eliminating maintenance by any means. But the goal by doing the most amount of work in the beginning and trying to do it right is to eliminate or reduce maintenance down the road.
Yeah, and again, it's a win-win situation. Win for you because you're not having to deal with those calls. Win for the tenant
because they're not having to make the calls.
Because they're not having to make the call, and they're not having to live with, oh, my AC went out, or oh, my sink's backed up, or oh, the toilet's overflowing. I mean, these are issues. These are problems, guys. Like, you don't want your tenants to deal with that either. They'd rather live and stay in a nice, clean place. Well, for the most part. So same thing. It's all. Oh, and then the win for you again is the refinance portion of this, which is the next step. Which is if you spend the money up front, you factor that into your initial, well, not your initial purchase, but your initial refinance with the bank. So then you don't actually have as much money in the property or that money outlay later on. So then you can cash flow month to month.
Well, that's a good point, Mike. We didn't even mention this in our notes here, but the quality of your rehab has a lot to do with the appraisal. So if you go into a property and you don't rehab it, or you do and you spend $3,000 to $5,000 on that rehab, well, when the appraiser comes out, he's going to be appraising, which really just means giving his opinion of value on what that home's worth. So what he's going to do is he's going to find like homes at like conditions to comp that property. So if you do spend 15 or 20 grand, in our case we try to spend at least 15,000, okay? Because what happens is we've improved the property. Therefore, when the appraiser comes out, he's now looking for comps that are equal to an improved property. So there's definitely a lot that goes into it there in terms of, do a decent rehab on your rentals.
What it comes back to, Dave, is knowing your numbers.
No, that's what it all comes back to. You're right, knowing your numbers. That's such an important thing that we need to highly emphasize and stress.
With rehabbing, you have to know your numbers. With the rentals, you have to know your numbers. With this burst strategy, you've got to know your numbers.
This business is very difficult to be good at if you don't know your numbers.
Which is why I love wholesaling. I'm going to circle back to where we both kind of cut our teeth in full-time investing, which is wholesaling.
Right.
You jump in, you really do learn your numbers because you've got other people walking the properties, hopefully with you, or again, giving you feedback on the properties that you're marketing and trying to buy and trying to sell. So knowing your numbers is extremely important. The hard truth is that a lot of times until you do your first rehab, sometimes you're just not going to know. So our objective is to try to provide you with as much value as we can, and hopefully, keep you from making the bigger, more costly mistakes.
Absolutely. So next, guys, know your area. Mike just mentioned know your numbers. Super important in all aspects of rentals, rehabbing, refinancing. The entire burst strategy is built on knowing your numbers. Next is knowing your area. Why does that matter? Well, here's why. We just talked about doing a rehab to a property to increase its value. So an appraiser then looks at comps that are like that. Well, in certain areas of town, at least in our town, and I'm pretty certain that it's the same in your town, you're going to have certain parts of town that have nicer homes and certain parts of town that have lower end homes. So you want to model your rehab to match the homes in that area that are going to comp out higher. Again, so it kind of rolls back into knowing your numbers. But here's a good example. In our area, in St. Louis, Missouri, the North County part of town is really great for rental properties. The numbers seem to work there more often than they do in any other part of town. When we go into these houses, we're not spending 60 or 80 grand on the rehabs. We're spending 15 to maybe 25 on average. And the reason is because that's what it's taking in terms of cost to get our property to comp out to where it works with our numbers. So know your area. Certain areas will require more expensive rehabs to comp those properties out, and other areas won't. Okay? So let's do a recap on what we talked about so far. We talked about, the reason to rehab, getting this entrepreneurial credit. Now, again, this is what our bankers are telling us. So this is their requirements. Now, when you go meet your banker, they may have a different requirement. But when you sit down with them, tell them that you're using the BRRRR strategy. Tell them that you learned about this strategy from David and Mike at the Discount Property Investor Podcast. Maybe they'll come listen to it, and if they don't know much about it, they'll learn too. But a lot of bankers out there are very familiar with the BRRRR strategy. And in order for them to give you a loan based on the appraisal and the appraisal only, they have to consider an entrepreneurial credit, which is banking language, in order for those underwriters and their due diligence to plan out or to play out properly.
And
okay?
I would also, a big caveat, I think that it takes time to develop a relationship with a bank. So if you're just starting out and this is your first one, you may not get that credit right away.
You may not get it at all. I think it took us at least 10 units or 10 houses before our banker even kind of told us about this.
Yeah,
it's
just
kind of a hidden, secretive thing among these bankers.
Well, it really is.
Kind of crazy.
And we didn't. We didn't even realize it that was kind of what they were doing. They were looking at, again, the appraisal. They always got the appraisal. They have to, but you always have to submit to the bank for your refinance all your numbers. They want to see, what did you buy it for? How much did you rehab it for? They want to know all the details, so then they can figure out kind of what you're doing and figure out what to lend on the property.
Right.
So like Dave said, it takes a while to build up that relationship before they kind of say, oh, okay, well, you guys are doing this. You guys know what you're doing. We've had a good track record of payments.
Hitting the table.
You did it too.
Look at it as trust. You're building trust with your bank. And it may take 5 to 10 units to get the trust on the level where the bank says, hey, you're no longer high risk for us. As long as you can prove that you've spent $15,000 on the rehab, then we're willing to look past all the little minor due diligence issues because we've built trust. And at that point, hey, what is it appraised for? Here's what we'll lend you on. It's great.
The thing is, a lot of times, we don't even want the full amount that they'll lend us.
It's correct. A lot of times we say, here's what we need to pay our lenders back, and it may be less than what the bank may be willing to lend.
Right, because again, we're after cash flow. So it's all about knowing your numbers. We want to have a rent that's going to pay the mortgage, pay everything else, pay the property manager, the taxes, the insurance, all that stuff, and then still provide us with a little bit of cash at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So if we take out a really, really big mortgage, we may not be able to have that cash flow. So it doesn't make sense from our perspective either.
Got it.
So yeah,
the reason to rehab, you want the entrepreneurial credit, and this is really what makes the strategy work, is this entrepreneurial credit. You want a hassle-free unit. So rehabbing the unit in the beginning versus trying to do a ton of maintenance later creates hassle-free or less hassle. So that's another very good reason that you want to rehab. The grade of the rehab. Again, we talked about knowing the area of town. That's going to affect things. And also knowing your numbers. How much do you have available to spend? What do you need to spend in order to get your comps from your appraiser to be where you need them to be? Don't overspend, don't underspend. You have to figure out where that line is to have a projection. Next, I want to kind of dive into a little bit, if you are going to GC this project on your own, or if you want to hire a GC. And there's no right or wrong answer with this. Both ways work great, but there's obviously advantages and disadvantages to both of these strategies. So I'm going to let Mike talk a little bit more about this because he handles it more in our business, dealing with the contractors. He's GCing a lot of our projects, and he's also working with other general contractors to help speed up. And that's one of the pros that we can talk about. So Mike, tell us a little bit about, the difference between the two. Why is one strategy better for certain people, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So I mean, I think the first thing I'll say is, if you've never swung a hammer before, that's okay. You can GC a job. If you don't like painting, don't like any manual labor, you can be the GC. GC is just the general contractor. So you're kind of like the
project manager.
The project manager.
It's exactly
just
what
think
it is.
of it
It's all
as
it is.
exactly. You're the owner of the property. You're going to go in and tell people what to do, or ask them, hey, can you do this to the property for me? That's basically what GC is, just a project manager. You go in, you're going to come up with a plan for the property. So you're going to walk through each room. You're going to say, okay, this needs to happen here, this needs to happen here, this needs to happen here. And then you figure out who's going to do each of those items for you. That's essentially all it is to GC a project, in my opinion. Super easy.
Right.
You're also going to have to pick out the materials, deliver them. Depends on what your contractors are willing and able to do for you. So what's the difference between... Hey man, I told you. So me and Dave have this running thing here. If you're watching us on YouTube, our camera bounces around a lot. It's because we both have a tendency to smack the table a lot when we talk.
We get excited when we talk.
So I may not look it, but I'm Italian. So we talk with our hands. It happens, you know. I lost my train of thought. So GCing a project yourself versus hiring a GC. And we're going to talk more about this in the next episode. But hiring a GC, so what are the advantages of that? Well, one, you've got an expert, or hopefully an expert, that manages projects, has a bunch of subcontractors that can do it for even less than hopefully you'd be able to hire them for. But what does that mean?
It's hands off, but in exchange, it's going to cost you more.
You're going to pay that person to manage the project for you.
Right.
So again, you can save money by trying to GC a project yourself, or you can learn a lot of it.
Or you can lose money by doing it yourself too if you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly.
So
if you have somebody come in and do the floors first, put in carpet first, and then, oh shoot, we got to paint, and your painters are messy, they could mess up your carpet or your new floors or your new whatever.
It's definitely
you put in your cabinets.
A process. But if you know what you're doing, or you've done a couple and made a few mistakes, which is okay. That's how Mike and I both learned. We've made every mistake in the book. That's why we're doing good today. So if you learn it and you want to do it yourself, that's one way. It's typically going to be cheaper. The other option is to hire the GC. You may pay a little bit more. You typically should pay a little bit more, but it's very hands off. When we hire a GC, we typically go to the property 3 times. Once when we buy it, once when we meet our GC to show them the work that we need to do and get a quote, and then once more when he's done and we want to pay him and we want to review the amount of work that was done and make sure the quality of that work meets our standards. So you have 2 different options there. So we'll dive into that more in later chapters. Last but not least, rental shortcuts. Okay? So tips for rehabbing rentals. Again, we kind of talked a little bit about this, but you don't want to do the rehab for a retail buyer because there's no reason to spend that kind of money on the property when you can probably get it to comp out for a lot less.
There's so many things that we can talk about for how to do rentals, like the shortcuts, the tips and tricks for it. One thing I'll go back to, and I think because this kind of relates to GCing it yourself, so this is a good segue into this, is the order of their project. So it's like, how are you going to rehab this property? If you're going to GC it yourself, you've got to have the plan kind of up front to help people with the flow of it. And it's all pretty logical when you think about it. The first thing you want to do when you get the property, you want to clean it out. So anything you're going to remove, you want to have ripped out first. So if you're going to replace the cabinets or the vanity in the bathroom, take that stuff out first.
Get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way.
Don't work around it. Just get it out. It makes it simpler for everybody.
Exactly. So the same thing like with the flooring. If the carpet's gross, get it out of there because it stinks. It's gross. You're going to replace it. Just get it out of there so you see what you're working with. You also, maybe you found some hardwood under there that you're going to save. Maybe not. But again, you just want to get it out. So you want to clean out the property first. Then the next thing you're going to do, you're going to figure out your materials. You're going to go measure, figure out what you need to put
together
back
a plan.
Put together your plan. You're going to basically go shopping, buy a bunch of your materials. You want to then, I think paint is next in my priority list. I want to paint the interior. Then I'm going to do kitchens and bath, put that stuff back together. Then I'm going to do my flooring and then all my touch-ups and final stuff. So like your touch-up paint, your baseboards, your light fixtures, you want to get those in, then maybe a light landscape, stuff like that. So I mean, that's kind of the basics of a property is I mean, that's the order of things that you want to do.
Can I throw in a pro tip? I think everybody likes
Absolutely.
pro tips.
Let's do it.
All right, pro tip. When you're doing your rehab, okay, part of the process in BRRRR is going to be getting an occupancy inspection. So BRRRR, buy, okay, renovate or rehab. Then you need an occupancy inspection before you can rent, and then we're going to refi.
So here in
So
St.
that occupancy inspection goes
real quick.
after the rehab, but before the rent.
So in St. Louis, it's required. Not everywhere do you
Good
have
point.
these things.
But a lot of places, I
A
would
lot
imagine.
of them, and a lot more municipalities are
Right.
popping up with these because they can get money and
Right.
it's a safety.
So
thing.
they're going to require what's called an
100%.
occupancy inspection. What is an occupancy inspection? Why would a town
Thank
even
you.
need that?
Thank you. So that's what I wanted to
Go there.
touch on
Yeah,
before we
sure.
got into that.
What
'cause
is
it's a
it?
great
Why do
tip.
they need it?
So why do you need occupancy inspections? One, the whole initial intent, I believe, was safety. They didn't want people to move into units that weren't fit for human habitation. That was the whole thing. And then fire safety. They just wanted to make sure that these were safe units for people to live in. And that's really where it started. Has it gotten a little out of control?
It's gotten a little out of control for a
Absolutely.
couple reasons. One is because now these inspectors, they're inspecting in their own neighborhoods. So whenever somebody wants to put a rental in there, they may say, oh, well, you need to change this, this, and this. And the stuff that they're recommending may or may not even be necessary, but they're going to require it. So the reason that I'm even bringing the whole occupancy inspection up is because dealing with inspectors can sometimes be costly, and it can also delay the whole BRRRR strategy because you can't rent them until your rehab is complete, which includes an occupancy inspection. So a tip for dealing with inspectors, pro tip, is leave a couple things for the inspector to find. Simple things, like maybe not put batteries in your smoke detector, okay? What are some other things that we may recommend to just leave for them to find? Because again, the job of the inspector is to go out and then make sure that property is fit and it's sound. So if they get there and they don't find anything, then they're going to start looking hard. And the idea is that you don't want to make them look hard. You don't want them to have to work hard for their inspections.
And I agree. I go back and forth. I'd say that's about the only one I would recommend is leaving batteries out of a smoke detector because that one's an easy fix.
You can often fix it while they're there.
Right.
Meaning he's going to hit the button, nothing happens. You can say, oh, don't worry, I got a battery in my car. But at that point, you guys are solving problems together. Subconsciously, you're working together and you don't realize it. Therefore, you're building rapport.
Mm-hmm.
You're not creating an enemy with somebody, you're creating a friend. You're like, hey, no worries. Don't write that down. Save your breath. I got a battery in the trunk. Right? So then he's moving on being like, man, not only does this guy care about this property, but he's willing to make it right. So that inspector's not going to be as picky because he sees that you care about the neighborhood that he probably lives in.
100%,
Pro tip.
100%. I like it, Dave. I like it, man. So that's, I'd say, a good little episode on just an introduction, really, to rehabbing for rentals, right? I mean, is there anything else we want to cover in this one before we move on?
I think that's it, guys. Let's move on to the next chapter. But this was a great episode.
Yeah. All right. A little bit about Discount Property Investor, though, guys. Remember, our main focus for anyone just tuning in is wholesaling. If you want to get started in real estate, we love talking about wholesaling. This is kind of a segue into our what we're doing now, acquiring rentals. Mm-hmm. But if you're interested in starting in investing, check out the freewholesalecourse.com. That's freewholesalecourse.com. We put together an entire free course on wholesaling. Mm-hmm. What else, Dave? We've got...
well, why does it matter? Because when we're buying our deals that go into our BRRRR strategy, our rental portfolio, we're buying them off market. And in order to buy something off market, you need to get good at marketing, okay? And our strategy is keep the best, sell the rest. So wholesaling and buying rental properties and building a portfolio.
So you're hitting the table now.
I am. It goes together so well. So I tell people, even if they have zero interest in wholesaling, right? They need to learn how to market. And that way they can cherry pick the good deals. And guess what? You may not have any interest in wholesaling, but if you get a great deal on a property that you know you can sell by making one Facebook post, are you not going to do that? So typically people that don't have interest in wholesaling do a lot of wholesales because the deals
They
are
do.
easy. So you want to learn how to wholesale. You want to learn how to market to motivated sellers. And then of course, at that point, you can decide what you want to do with those deals. Do you want to keep them as rentals? Do you want to wholesale them? Or maybe you want to fix and flip? Lots of options. So as Mike said, check out the freewholesalecourse.com to get started and learn. If you have questions beyond that course, reach out to us. There's a contact information in the course, and we also have a coaching program. So we would be more than happy to talk with you, about some of those options. And that's about it, guys.
Love it. Thanks for
signing
listening.
off.
Thanks for listening. Welcome back to Season 2 of the Discount Property Investor Podcast. Our mission is to share with you what we have learned from our experience and the experience of others to help you make more money investing like a pro. We want to teach you how to create wealth by investing in real estate the Discount Property Investor way. Make sure you never miss an episode and download the Discount Property Investor app in Google Play or iTunes today. To jumpstart your real estate investing career, visit freewholesalecourse.com, the most complete free course on wholesaling real estate ever. Thanks for tuning in.